All right, guys, in the past we did a combine walk around where we were physically walking around the combine. The problem with that is it's tough with a group of people to point at the things we're talking about. Plus, there's a lot of stuff that we really can't touch base on very easily. So, put in a slideshow. We know you guys love just sitting there staring at the screen, so we'll give it a try this way. But anyway, we put a lot of time and effort into these handouts. And if you guys have been here in the past, you've gotten these in the past. Sometimes things change from year to year, but keep them in the combine. There are times where one of us will reference like, hey, it's in that book. Why don't you ever think, oh, well, it's in the pickup. It's like, well, what good's that doing you right now? So we put a lot of time and effort into these to help you guys. So that way you're not trying to call one of us to bug us just because it's some little thing in there that you can figure out on your own without sitting on hold or something like that. So keep these books handy. And if you have old ones from the past, those are fine. There's just been some updates in the later ones. Like one of the updates in this one this year is on the back page. There is a QR code that you can scan to call direct, but basically a direct link to call the individual lines to get hold of different departments. Put together a little slide showing the different models that are being built now. You got the smallest being the 6160, the biggest being the AF11. One thing to note as you come across on the classes more or less don't really matter. You'll hear people talking a class 7, class 8. You know, the class 9, for instance, a 9260 and an AF9 both fit in the same class technically, but they're completely different animals as far as cleaning capacity and grain tank capacity. You get to the class 10 plus, if someone says there's a class 11 combine, there isn't. It's class 10 plus. To my knowledge, they haven't made the bigger class. It's just class 10 plus. So the AF10 is a class 10, AF11 is a class 10 plus. We don't have any of the AFs around yet. I know our sales guys are pretty excited about getting an AF9 at least, so we can go see what wet corn will do going through one of them. If you look back, just historically, look at a Legacy 1420 combine. Look at the horsepower range from there to the AF11. There's been a little bit of change over the years. 600 horse is all, but I put this chart together just showing the rated and max horsepower of the different models. Cleaning capacity. See if I can get my pointer to work. Yeah, your cleaning capacity there's a big change just from the 6160 to the AF11. Now the yellow highlighted, when you see those specs for the AF combines, that is metric horsepower, which when you do the math, it actually is smaller. So the AF9 is actually the same as a 9260. So that metric horsepower, just, I don't know why they did it that way, but I just wanted to point that out. Now the AF9 9260 actually have different engines. The AF9 actually has a smaller engine than the 9260, but both rated at the same horsepower. But you look at the cleaning capacity and the grain tank capacity, and it's a significant improvement or enlargement there. Looking at the 260 series, the 260 series would be our flagship combines, and most of my slides are going to pertain to the flagship model, which is the vast majority of what we have out there. There'll be some references that'll go to the mid-range, and some can go either way. But on the 260 series, one of the updates on the manifold, they boxed it in, and on the Cursor 13, they added a boxer on the turbo. I don't think that's for our area so much. It's more for like the sunflower areas where they have trouble with stuff sticking on the exhaust manifold and starting fires. They box that to try to keep that out. So you notice if you pop the engine hood on one of these and you look, and it's a tin shield over it. It's sealed up there pretty tight, but just one of the changes on the later ones. Pro 1200, so all the 260 series will have Pro 1200s, and it'll be dual 1200s in them. You can see over the picture, come from factory, that's the only way they're going to show. Now you cannot put a Pro 1200 in an older combine, and you cannot put a Pro 700 or plus in the 260 series. There's a defining line there, and I don't think that'll probably ever change. Now, other things on the Pro 1200, just change some of the yield moisture monitoring. I mean, basically it's still the same system. You still have the same functionality, but when they get in the AFS portion, they'll talk about some of the differences in your calibrations. Grain camera. So all the 250 series with automation have had a grain camera on it, but on a Pro 700, you could never view that camera. With the Pro 1200, you can view that camera, which the combine automation is already using that view to make adjustments. Now you can see it. Now, what good you can make of that, that's up to you. New seat options on the 260. There's a lot nicer seat, a few more functions on it. Feeder stripper bar options. So all the flagship combines in the area over the years, we've removed the feeder stripper support. That support up here by the feeder sprocket. We've had a lot of trouble with the plugging, starting fires, jumping feeder chains, stuff like that. So most of them we've removed that support out of. Now it is an option to order these from the factory without that support in them, and I think that's how all of our machines we're ordering now and going forward are. On the back, when you have the horizontal spreaders, which are your spinning discs, they added some shields to help reduce the amount of chaff building up on the engine deck. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes going forward. Someone was asking at the Humphrey Clinic about a part number for those shields, and I didn't look too hard, but I hadn't seen anything on it yet, if it's a kit that we can buy or whatnot for the older machines. Other 260 series, we have reel reversing features. So when you're reversing your feeder on the 260 series, the reel can reverse also to help move that material out. If you're that full that you need room, that'll help move some of that out. There's a new boot up option on the Pro 1200. So anyone that's been around the Pro 1200 and the tractors or the combines knows they take a long time to shut down and power back up. So if you're shutting down to fill with fuel or blow your air filter out, it's quite a process. And then you got to wait for your receiver to converge. There's a new software option that is option in the tractors too. We haven't turned any of them on just because with planter glitches and stuff, we just felt through the spring. If we need you to cycle power, we need that monitor to shut off, not wait 20 minutes. But with the option, it'll go into a standby mode for 20 minutes. And in the Pro 1200, you can navigate in to the menu, System Advanced tab, and you can turn the standby mode on. And then also for your Vector Pro, you can set it to keep alive. So basically, the monitor will stay in standby for 20 minutes. The Vector Pro, from what I understand, will stay online for an hour or 2 hours, 120 minutes. So if you're fully converged and you shut off to fuel up, you don't have to worry about trying to converge again. Which you guys on RTK, that's not the issue. It's the RTX and that where you're waiting on it to converge. If you see down here, when you go to actually shut the monitor off, once you have this stuff turned on, it gives you another checkbox. So this is similar to the message you see before, but it says system is going into standby. If you're shutting the machine off for good, like for the night, you click that box and it shuts it off completely. Otherwise, it's going to stay on standby mode. You take off driving home, it's still going to be on standby mode. It's going to be a little bit of a battery load, not much, but if you have this option turned on, you're probably going to want to hit the system shutdown to just shut it off when you're leaving. But it'll come factory set to off. So if you're around it, it won't automatically go in standby mode unless you go in and turn it on. There is grain cart automation options now for the 260 series. Last year there was not. Rear camera is now standard equipment. There's a note about the Pro 700. We're going to talk about it more. That plus, like I said, the Pro 700 Plus or Pro 700, Pro 700 Plus will not work in the 260 series, but as you guys can see on that display, it's a lot nicer to see. So any of you that have that might want to update on your older machines. We did quite a few planter systems where we were going to that this spring, a lot more power. When you get into hooking up your head and setting up your header features, you get a lot of calls on this. So when you first hook up to your head for the first time of the year or when you're switching heads, always come in and check the max work height, and that's going to be repeated later again too, but that's your acre counter height. Make sure that is set in not every combine is going to be the same. Every operation is going to be different, but you want to make sure when you're turning on the ends that your acre counter is shutting off. When you're lowering the head back down, that it's turning on. If you go through a dip in the field and even the auto header height's moving, just make sure it's not tripping your acre counter because your map's going to look really goofy. It's going to throw your yield per acre and everything off. So just be watching that, and it's going to change from head to head. Header type and header subtype. Make sure you're getting that in there. If you hook up to your draper head and it won't tilt forward or back, make sure that's on draper Verifeed and either on the FD2 series or the 2000 series, depending on if you have the newer or the older draper. Header sensors enabled. I get a lot of calls that people go through the header calibration, they get done, auto header height won't work. I go into head 2, Go into head 2 and header sensors, and they're set to disabled. You need to turn them on because basically that's telling the combine it does not have header sensors. So you enable them. Now you have to go back and recalibrate so it'll actually look at the sensors, run through calibration, and it works. So just before you go through all the work calibrating, make sure they're enabled. If you have a 250 or 260 series, most of them have the faceplate tilt, the fore-aft tilt. And when you're hooked to a draper head, you can tilt that draper head. You determine that on the header feeder features. So in toolbox head 2, you select between header and toolbox head 2 or feeder. It'd be feeder features as the faceplate on the combine tilts for corn head. Header features would be the draper head. What I usually recommend guys do on a draper head is set it to feeder, get your faceplate in the middle of travel, then switch it to feeder or to header features, so then your draper head does the rest. I added that in there. That's for the John Deere guys that can't figure out the right way to raise and lower the head, because the buttons are backward between a John Deere and a case. The case is right, the Deere's wrong, I'm sure of it. Anyway, but if you can't get it figured out, or you're just used to it, you can go in here and change that so that it's backwards. Then one of us jumps in there and we have a hell of a time because it's backwards, everything we're used to. But that is an option that was added in on the 50 series that you can switch that around. On the Pro 1200, it's a very similar way of getting into all this stuff. You go into menu, header, you can set up your header types. It's actually, in my opinion, when we went to 1200 on a planter, it's been a learning curve. I struggle. To me, on the combine, going to the Pro 1200 has been a lot easier. Seems like it's laid out a lot nicer. You go to header, and you got all your header settings. You don't have to scroll clear to the side to go to head 1, head 2, and feeder, all that. But basically, once you get in there, you're changing the same stuff. You'll make sure you enable your header sensors. Header sensor calibration. You're going to the calibration menu on a Pro 1200 just like you do on your Pro 700. You go into HHC header and you run through the steps. The Pro 700, you have 4 steps. This, you got 11 steps, but it's still doing the same thing. It's learning the weight of the head. It's learning the travel of the sensors. It's learning all of that. So when you switch heads, you go, say an 8-row corn head versus a 12-row chopping head, that combine needs to know what that head weighs if it's going to try to adjust correctly as you're going through the field. So it's weighing that, it's learning the sensor travel, all that. If you go through and you get a fault code, don't just call and say my calibration failed. Pay attention to what it says here. The calibration aborted, we realize that. Abort code 11, that doesn't mean much. Invalid feeder angle sensor, that tells us something. So pay attention to what that says. If it's left, HHC left, that's your header height control sensor left. Go to look at your left sensor on the head. Corn head, maybe the chain's hooked and it's not traveling. Broken wire, depending on what it says here. In this instance, it's referring to this sensor here on the side of the feeder house where the feeder house pivots up and down. Feeder angle sensor. In this exact instance, the feeder lock was on. So when the feeder went to lower, it only went part way. It knew the voltage didn't change as much as it should have, so it threw the fault. So right there, feeder angle sensor, if you know that that's a feeder angle sensor, my sensor might be a problem. In this case, like I said, the feeder didn't move because the lock stopped it. But that is something we do deal with. Sometimes those sensors get kind of sticky. If it's a header height sensor, it could be sticking, binding. If it's a draper head, maybe your cable broke, something like that. When you're latching onto the head, make sure you're latching on tight to the head. Your handle should be locked in tight. You can adjust these bolts. Some people don't realize there's slotted holes there. Make sure that's latching in tight. Reason being, first of all, you don't want the head to fall off. But the next thing is, as you're going through the field, you go through a draw or something, that head loosens, picks up on it, creates a gap at the bottom. You get some grain that falls partially through there, or trash. And then when the head picks back up, it's pinched in there and it's got a gap. And now you're going to have grain falling through there. You might be troubleshooting sieve loss only to realize it's clear up at the head. So if you have it latched tight to begin with, if you do bottom out at something, it's less chance to be creating a gap for your material to come out. Header connector, the hydraulic connector, make sure you wipe those tips off when you plug them in. Usually starting off the season, we got a lot of guys that get torn seals on those. Some of them, make sure when you're pulling, when you're engaging it, to kind of help it. Don't just rely on the lever to pull it in, because if those come in crooked, it can tear those seals and you'll be puking oil out. That arrow is pointing to the drum stops. In your book, it'll show to change your drum stops between corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever. We typically really don't ever see an issue. We leave it in the top position all the time. So I would just leave it in the top position. The book says change it. I wouldn't worry about it. Other things pointing at the feeder chain tension. So on a flagship, we usually look for about an inch, inch and a half off the floor, eyeballing. The older mid-range combines like the 7130 or 2388, the old saying was pass a dime, hold a nickel. So if you had the feeder down and you dropped a dime, it's going to slide underneath the chain. You drop a nickel, catch it. So ideally, you want that chain just off the floor. But the flagships, if you do that, you're going to wear out your chain faster. You're going to be jumping chains, stuff like that. So keep it a little tighter. This picture kind of shows, you should, obviously this feeder is clean. That makes it easy. I realize when you unhook from your corn head and you look in there, it's full of corn, you can't see. But you want that chain up off the floor. Anyone that's ran the Case IH flagship combine knows that's got the direct header drive. You got your solid drive shaft going all the way from the drive clutch and CVT down to your feeder and header drives. No belts to slip or anything like that, a lot less maintenance. That gives a reverser option. So any of you at the flagship, you're familiar with that. If you got a mid-range, you don't have to worry about the belts wearing out. You get the variable feeder speed. Your CVT here is creating your variable feeder speed. There's only a couple machines that we have around like this, but there is an option on the flagship to have the heavy-duty feeder drive. And that is shown with a larger header drive gearbox. It's painted black, more oil capacity, more cooling, more for the 16 and 18 row, particularly chopping heads. We don't see much of that around here, or any of that to that big of heads that are chopping. So we don't have many of that option around here. It's a pretty expensive option, but it is a nice heavy duty drive. So you might, if you see one of the black gearbox, that's the story. And the drive line and clutches and everything are heavier on it. It's just showing a breakdown, a cutaway of the flagship feeder. The mid-range is going to be pretty similar. You got your rock trap beater here at the top, feeder sprocket, chain coming in, feeder faceplate on the front with a 12-degree fore and aft. Drive splines on your feeder drive gearbox. So many years ago, we felt we had a lot of trouble with these splines failing up here. Now we don't have quite as much trouble. The main change is they added grease zerks so we can get in there and grease those. So if you got grease zerk, and all of you guys, even if you have a 30 or 40 series around here, it's probably been updated to where you should have the grease zerk to grease those splines. When they went to the 50 series, they added a replaceable hub. We've replaced a couple just because we were there, but we haven't had any wear out. So that new improvement is replaceable, but really hasn't caused any trouble. But they're greasable also, and that helps. So make sure you're getting in. You have to take the cover off your feeder to get in there and grease that. And make sure once a year, twice a year to do that. Rear feeder bearings. A lot of you have probably experienced this where the feeder bearings would go out. So on the rock trap beater and your feeder sprocket, they added 2024 and later added grease zerks, but the replaceable bearings you buy now will have a spot for a grease zerk. You can get a kit that has the hoses. A lot of times we just put a 45-degree zerk in there and we get along fine. You don't have to grease it a lot. Twice a year is way more than the previous one was getting. Here we got a slide showing the different rotors. So even though we don't have any AF combines around here, everyone wants to know about them. So you got your twin rotor. That's what the AF11 has. So if you look, the dual rotor, 39 inches longer than our traditional rotor in these combines. The AF9 and 10 has a single rotor, but it's 42 inches longer than our other rotors. So when I talk about a lot more threshing capacity, even though the rotor in an AF9 and 10 is the same diameter, it's a lot longer, a lot more concave, a lot more threshing and separating area. They've got a feed accelerator, I'm not sure the exact terminology, but feed accelerator type drum to help feed those rotors. This is our standard AFX rotor. That's going to be a flagship rotor, but it's similar in the mid-range combines. You got your elephant ears on the front, you got your rasp bars, you got your straight bars at the back, and your helical kickers at the very back. Here's showing our rasp bars. You got the straight bars. When we refer to a straight bar, that's what we're looking at. If you see at the back there, it's going across two of those mounts. Then you got our standard rasp bar and our extended wear chrome rasp bar. The only difference is the material they're made out of. If the rotor came factory as a standard rotor, usually when we replace them, we put the extended wear in because they're going to last 8 times as long. I don't know, a lot longer. The back, or the furthest one there, is the spiked rasp bar. And later years here, we've been adding a lot of those in. So from the factory, The rotor comes with 4 of these straight bars, and then it had 8 spiked bars. We've been going in lately and adding 8 more spiked bars, so we've been adding a spike in front of them behind each one of those straight bars. Those spikes, I think the original idea behind them was to help tear up the ropes in soybeans and green soybeans, to help tear those up so you can process it. But we found in corn, especially, you get green leaf corn, some of these newer hybrids, if you spray fungicide, it seems like the plants stay green. Those green leaves take your kernels out the back. Getting those spike bars in there really helps to tear that up and get those kernels out of there. So with that being said, we're running 16 spike bars in the back of the rotor, and it's been a definite improvement. Some of you guys may remove these straight bars when you do soybeans. If you're only doing a couple quarters of soybeans, I wouldn't mess around with it. But if you're doing a lot of acres of soybeans, we get guys taking these straight bars out and then just putting a regular rasp bar in its place. Leave your spiked ones alone, just put a regular rasp bar in its place. Keep your straight bars till you're ready to go to corn. You'll want them back in when you go to corn. But seen some definite efficiency improvements by having those out of there. They take a lot of horsepower. There's a flagship group on Facebook. I hear people all the time on corn. They'll put 8 straight bars in the back of the rotor and then they complain about horsepower. It's like, well, that's just slowing the crop down. That's where we add those kickers in there. We don't need to slow it down. We just need to get those kernels out. So let's stir it up. This is kind of our traditional flagship concave or rasp rotor cage and cone area with our vanes. When you go to the 50 series, they're adjustable vanes from the cab. And instead of one long vane, like what's pictured up in the top right corner, we got short vanes. So you'll have 2 vanes sitting above each other, and they each move individually or independently from each other, although they're tied together. So when you're adjusting it, you have a bunch of short vanes turning instead of one long one. You see that actuator there. Prior to that, if you have a 40 series or older or any of the mid-range, you have to loosen bolts and adjust your vanes. You have to loosen all 3 bolts and adjust them. Most people don't do it because it's a dirty job. When you got this system on the 50 and 60 series and you're on automation, it's adjusting it automatically. Otherwise, you got the buttons right there you can adjust on the go. Concaves, we talk about this every year, but there's always a lot of confusion over it. So small wire concaves. This is your wheat, your rye concave here. Typically, you run them all in a flagship in the front 4 positions, or you run a similar one in all 3 front positions of your mid-range. But anyway, holds the grain in there to get it threshed. This is what we call the large wire, and I got them both pictures here. You see up above, we got a skip wire. The only difference between the large wire and the skip wire is the skip wire is missing half the wires. It skipped a wire. So a lot of times on a flagship, you'll see this in the front right corner, if not all 4 front concaves. The back, you would see the skip wire. More often now, we're going to that large wire in the front right corner, round bars in the other 3 spots on the front, and then lately we've been adding 25 millimeter round bars in the back. Instead of having the skip wire in the back, which a lot of times can lead to plugging like this, we're going to that 25 millimeter round bar. Same size of bar, but you can tell they're further apart, 16 millimeters apart versus 25 millimeters apart. So I've heard of guys putting the standard round bar in the back and not having good luck with it. That's why they came out with one with a larger gap. That makes a difference. So you add that 25 millimeter round bar in the back with some spike bars, we seem to be having a lot better luck getting everything separated out. Up here, if you'll look, so the rotor is the same size on a 2388 has the same size rotor basically as a 9260. How are we getting extra threshing? It's in the concave wrap, most of it. So if you look, the red line would be they're calling a 130 series, like the 7130, 2388, them. 156 degrees, whereas we have a 180 degree wrap on the concaves on a flagship. So we got more wrap around that rotor to help with the threshing and separating. See here, kind of our crop flow coming in. You got your rotor spinning. The whole thing we're after with the rasp bars and vanes is to get everything threshed and separated and down on the shaker pan, nice level spread out, so that way we're not too deep. The airflow can be even across the whole thing. Our airflow, making sure we're getting good airflow. Make sure the shields on the side of the cleaning fan are there for a reason. I've seen guys take those shields off for working on, not put them back on, and then get shucks up against the cleaning fan and it cuts air off. Your fan's still spinning, but you don't have the airflow because you restricted it. So make sure you don't have outside debris problems, because right there, if your grain cart guy can't see it, you're probably not going to, because you're going to shut the separator off, get out, go down there. By then, they fell off because you shut the suction off when you shut your separator off. So that can mess with the person. It's like, I start the separator up, I go 2 pivot towers, it's great, and then it starts causing trouble. Yeah, start pulling those leaves back up. So just watch so you're not restricting your airflow. So when we're talking about the even threshing, we want to even on both sides. We got our cleaning system on the flagship. The whole thing self-levels to keep our crop mat level so we're not overloading one side of the sieve. We got an auto cleaning fan option on 2017 and later, so as you go down hills, up hills, it can vary your cleaning fan speed. That's an option you can turn on and off in the monitor. Most of us around here don't have enough hills to where it makes that much difference, but if you're in hilly ground, it can make quite a difference to help keep from blowing it out the back when you're going up the hill. Automation. 250 series, 260 series of automation. This just kind of quick showing all the sensors and everything involved. It automatically adjusts 7 machine settings when you're using automation and controlling on your crop flow, your ground speed. That it's going to control your ground speed. If you're just running automation, it's just going to run your rotor speed, your cleaning fan, your sieves, and your cage vanes. But look at everything that's involved to make that automation work. There's a lot going on there. The main sensor I want to point out for the automation is on your cleaning system. These sensors, you'll see if you look in the back of the combine, you'll see these little sensors. And then there's another set between the top and bottom sieve. Those are your air pressure sensors. Those are what determine how loaded your sieves are, to determine if they need to open and close sieve, speed up, fan that. If you hit those with a power washer or blowgun, you might ruin those sensors. And it's not, you don't just replacing that, you're replacing the whole thing. So I'm more or less pointing it out just to make sure if you're a high school kid here, go wash the combine, just make sure he stays delicate around those areas. So this is our 2388 7130, the mid-range style. So instead of that shaker pan, it's got bed augers. But either way, how those are working, if you got the shaker pan, it's shaking. It's just like taking a bag of travel mix, and after it shook a few times, all your M&Ms are at the bottom. All the good stuff's at the bottom. That's the same thing with that shaker pan. It's shaking. The light stuff goes to the top. The heavy grain goes to the bottom. These augers are doing the same thing. It's stirring it up, but it works the light items at the top, keeps the heavy items at the bottom. So when they come off the back, either it's the bed augers or the shaker pan, it lands on the sieve. It's drained first, so that way the air can blow the trash out. I mentioned on that previous slide how the flagship, the whole self-leveling frame tilts. If you have the later mid-range combine, they don't tilt the cleaning system, but they have, I call it a side shake. But basically, your traditional forward and back shake, it'll add a side to side in there to help move that grain to the other side. And it can make quite a difference on the capacity of those mid-range machines, even on a slight angle, just to help get it thrown uphill so you're not too deep on one side. Make sure your sieves are in good shape. This is pictures out of a mid-range combine. Some of the reasons that cause it, a hole in your chopper pan, or in this case, there wasn't a hole in the chopper pan. I think they combine corn with the chopper in high. And on a mid-range, you can do that. There's no sensor to tell you otherwise, but those cobs will bounce off the top and go down and damage the sieve. Eventually, they'll put a hole in the top sieve, and then they go after your bottom sieve. So be watching for that, because those sieves get real expensive. But if these fingers are all messed up, it's really tough to adjust a sieve. The flagships, basically all of them have alarms in there that if you kick the separator on and it thinks it has a corn head on the front, it'll shut it back off or tell you to shut it off because it knows the chopper's going too high. Or if the stationary knives are engaged, it won't even let you engage the separator because it says, you told me you have a corn head on, I'm not going to do that. Sensors can be a pain in the butt, but this guy wishes he had sensors. Save him some money there. Sieve settings. We got some sieve gauges out here, those little red plastic things. They got measurements on them where you can go through and calibrate the sieves. So everything with electric sieve adjust, you can calibrate those sieve settings. Whether you do that or not, just make sure if you have multiple machines running and you're comparing settings, make sure you're set the same way. If you're calling me because you're losing grain out the back, and you say the sieves are open all the way, it's like, what are they at? Yeah, they're 25s. Like, did you visually look to make sure they're wide open? Because I've had instances, someone goes back there, is like, no, it's closed. Something went wrong. Calibration got out, the actuator went bad. Make sure your sieves are actually where they say they are, because just because the monitor says 25, they're closed. They're not gonna be letting anything through. Pre-sieve on the flagship combines, the 1560 series, they're electric adjust on the pre-sieve, so you can calibrate it the same way you do your other ones. If you have the older ones, you can adjust with the slot on the back. Everyone talks notches, like third, fourth notch from the top. Well, if there's a slotted hole to adjust it, not every combine is going to be the same. So compare that if you say, well, my neighbor's at the fourth notch, so I went the fourth notch and I filled the fan full of corn. It's like, well, but when you went to his third notch, fourth notch, whatever, is closed and yours is wide open, it makes quite a difference there. So even if you compare machines side by side, a millimeter doesn't seem like much, but make quite a change. Best way to see how your combine is performing is to do a kill stall. On a belt drive combine, 2388, 6088, 7130, be cautious, because when you're kill stalling, you are stopping this combine while you're loaded going through the field. You have to get it going again. With the flagship combine, you got the rotor deslug. There's ways to get it going without any extra effort. But the idea with a kill stall is to stop everything in place to see where it's at. So ideally you want to be below 85% load if you're a belt drive machine. Otherwise you want to be at the speed and capacity of how you're running. If today we're in 230 bushel corn and we're running 4.5 mile an hour, that's where we're going to run, but I'm losing out the back or I've got quality issues, whatever. Make sure you're replicating that when you're doing this kill stall. So the kill stall, basically what you're doing is trying to kill the machine as smoothly and quickly as you can. So you're stepping on the brakes, you're throwing the hydro all the way ahead and pulling the throttle back all at the same time to basically stop everything in place. If you don't do it right, you get out, you open your side panels and the rotor's still spinning, you just, well, start over again, because it cleared up any evidence you were going to have to compare. So if you can get that stopped, you're basically killing the engine. You're stopping everything in its tracks. Get all your switches shut off, start the engine back up so it can cool down properly. Then you can get out and go look things over. If you have a 250 or 260 series, they add a kill stall procedure into the monitor. So whether it's Pro 700 or the Pro 1200, you go into the Procedures tab, Kill Stall, Procedures tab, Kill Stall, and it's going to perform this for you. So I've got a short little video here. We'll see how it comes out, but this is one I took myself out here in the lot. See if you can kind of follow along. The audio must be off. Engage your separator and your feeder. Full throttle. And then you take off through the field at your normal harvesting speed. It is critical to get your speed set where you're going to normally be harvesting. So once you're up, the combine's full, go into your Procedures tab, hit the drop down, hit the kill stall, hit OK. Basically it's telling you to make sure you're just operating at your desired speed. Hit OK. And it brought the combine to a stop, engine and everything. Pull your hydro back, shut your switches off, pull your throttle back, and you shut the key off. After the monitor shuts off, make sure to start your engine back up and let it run so it can properly cool down. Now you can get out and to look over your threshing, separating, and cleaning functions to see where your issues may lie. So the procedure I talked about, where you're trying to step on the brakes, put the hydro ahead, and pull the throttle back at the same time without jerking the machine to a stop or something like that, that was very smooth through here. So, of course, this was on the lot here, but I see going through the field that being nice and smooth too. It wasn't near as jerky as when you're trying to perform it on your own. It's just the 250 and 260 series, I believe. But if you have one of those machines, don't be afraid to use that function to help you see what's going on. So with that, now you've stopped, you've got your concaves full. You're full in the middle of threshing, separating, and cleaning. All your threshing should be done up here in the front. So if you're looking up here in the front and you got ears that have kernels on, and they're at the, say they're at the second concave here and they got kernels on, you got a threshing problem. You need to mess with your concave adjustment or your rotor speed. You need to figure out how to get that threshed. If it's all threshed, great. Now you go to the back, and you can't see the fourth module back here, but reach up in there and reach your fingers up through the holes and wiggle the trash. If you start getting kernels falling out in that fourth concave, just assume those are gone, because think that while everything's flowing through there, if you got kernels that far back, they're probably gone out the back of the machine. So there's a separating problem. You got to figure out what we got to do to separate it, but at least you know it's a separating problem, because you had it threshed up in the front, we just didn't get separated. Now, if you still have ears with kernels on here, they might be separated here, but that was a threshing problem it's getting threshed at the back, and there's no time for separation. Then you're going to look underneath the rotor. So if say all that's good, you need to get those issues corrected on the rotor. Get those corrected, then you move down. We're looking at this, obviously, is the shaker pan on a flagship. The same thing on the bed augers. Make sure the crop depth, the load, is the same on both sides. Auger's a little tougher to check. Here it's pretty easy. Stick a tape measure, your finger right down in there. See how deep it is on the left side? Go around the right side, check the same. That should be even. If not, you're overloading one side or the other. Concave gap, rotor speed can affect that. Sometimes you can go into the monitor and put a little tweak so the sieve runs a little crooked to help offset it, but you're just putting a band-aid on them. But if you go to the back of the machine and look, if you're heavier, and this is an exaggeration, but it kind of shows you what's going on there. You look on that right-hand side, look how deep it is here. All your airflow is coming out here. Your fan might be running 11 or 50 RPM, but all the air is coming out over there because it can, path of least resistance. So meanwhile, all your grain in here is just going right out back the combine because there's no air lifting the trash out. It's all going the easy way. So that's why we want to be level on both sides as we're going through the cleaning system. Now this one's obviously overloaded at the right-hand side. So it had other issues. Clean grain elevator. I usually tell guys, basically all these machines have 2-speed elevator, whether it's a legacy, a mid-range, flagship. But I usually tell guys, try to stay on the low side as long as you can, because it's a lot less wear and tear on everything. If you're doing soybeans or small grain, definitely stay on the low side. You go to corn, if you're high yielding corn, run 12-row head, no matter what, you're probably going to need to go to the high side. But just when you switch back to beans, just try to remember to go back to low side. You'll get a lot more life out of your paddle chain, your elevator, your sprockets, all that. Now, when you do switch, when you switch speeds, it does require yield monitor calibration because your impact sensor is getting grain thrown at it at a different speed. This is showing the pictures of flagship, which you're moving a belt. One thing to point out is the tensioner pulley for that belt. You need to take a 15/16 socket, loosen that pulley, and move the spacer bushing so it stays lined up with the belt. Otherwise, it might run, but it's hard on the belt, and there's a good chance it'll jump off. So make sure you're doing that. If you're on the older legacy or mid-range combine, you're going to be switching a chain on a sprocket. It's not quite as easy as the flagship, but worth doing. If you're repeatedly filling your fan full of corn and you're on the low side, that's a sign you need to go to the high side. Paddle chain adjustment. You can greatly extend the life of not only your paddle chain, but your elevator and your sprockets, keeping your paddle chain adjusted properly. Now the picture doesn't really show it, but we're looking at the bottom sprocket here, and I always want to where I can slide this chain side to side on the sprocket, but it's really not sagging off the sprocket. It should be almost a snug sliding. By keeping that chain tight, you're keeping those paddles going flat when they go up. Otherwise, that chain starts getting loose, they can do this. Well, that's going to wear the chain worse because those links are flexing more. Plus, it's going to wear the elevator out because now you're pushing those chain links into the elevator divider, wearing them. And the chains, you can tell, you walk beside a combine that's running, you can hear a lot of rattling, especially if you open the trap door and then that chain's flopping out of there. Keep them adjusted. They'll get a lot more life out of them. On all the flagship combines and the later mid-ranges, this your adjustment. I get some questions on that, on how you're adjusting it. Basically, whether you're using the nuts or the whole bolt, usually you leave the bolt. You don't turn the bolt because it's only threaded up into there a little ways. You're adjusting the nuts, but you're pushing that tube up, and that's tilting the whole elevator head to tighten your paddle chain. And when that ring gets up close to there, you need to drop it down and take a link out, or maybe put a paddle chain in. Now, sometimes we'll find one of these that this plate is bowed really bad or broke, or maybe that whole tube's broke. I think most of the time the reason that happens is the chain got too loose. And we look back at here, if that chain's too loose and it's hanging off that sprocket, I look at it as the sprocket tooth came around and that roller caught right on the tip of it, and now the chain is really, really tight and it pops the chain or bends that. I think that's a lot of what happens. Of course, once it happens, you don't know what caused it because stuff's broke. But that's an example, keeping your paddle chain tight. Now, I think these can break just from vibration. These can probably bend from other things, but usually if that bends, we'll just throw a flat plate on the top there to bridge across, because usually it's just the center that bends down. But if you see that bending and going at an angle, know your chain's loose, you need to get it tightened, but put a plate across to support that before your tube breaks. But paddle chain tension is very critical. Moisture bypass. A lot of combines we get in for inspection, we will check, and the little bypass auger will be plugged. We'll open it up, and there's a lot of times soybeans in there, which means it didn't work for all the corn. So if you don't pay much attention to the yield monitor because it's never right, make sure that it's able to work. So that auger should be running every time that cavity fills up with grain, it kicks on to empty out so you get new grain in there. If that's not cycling, if you know I went through a low spot and the moisture never changed, you might want to go check that auger because it's probably stuck. A little cob can do it. Some, went through some weeds and you got some gummy crap in there, and it'll usually just blows the fuse. Some of them, it's right there by the motor on the elevator. Otherwise, on the automation combine, some of those, it's in the cab. Now, do not go, they come factory, the 5 amp, a lot of times we'll go 7.5. Do not go 10 or bigger, because there's usually another fuse upstream that runs more stuff that's a 10 amp or 15. And when you blow that, you're going to have a bunch of other crap going on. You don't know what caused it. We've kind of learned, well, let's go check the moisture bypass just to make sure that doesn't have a 20 amp fuse in it and it blew the next thing up. So if it can't run with a 7.5 amp fuse in there, you got to put bigger. There's something wrong with it. Probably needs a new motor. Something's catching, something like that. Choppers. So obviously on the right side, a chopper knife missing, in my opinion, you need to shut the machine down and get a chopper knife in there. Sometimes guys run a long time missing a chopper knife, but I've seen a lot of cracks form in the sides of machines, hydraulic lines break, stuff like that. It's a vibration of the machine. When you're running chopper and low for corn, not so bad, but you're in high for beans, it can cause a lot of damage in a short amount of time. Like I said, I've seen some guys run quite a while and it's fine, and then the next machine says, yeah, an hour ago I ran something through and I didn't go look, but now I got cracks and got problems. Like the chopper's running out of balance. So if you put a new knife in by rights, you need to replace the one opposite it to keep them even. Now, if the one opposite it's like new, you probably don't need to do that, but you're trying to keep it balanced. Another thing to look at, this knife here, it's getting a little curved, but there's still hardened material there. But if you're in really green stem soybeans, we've seen where that little rounded edge isn't enough to keep grabbing that green material and pulling it through, and you'll start plugging. Take a lot more horsepower, and it'll physically start plugging between the rotor and chopper. We've seen some fires start from that material building up there. It just can't get through. Usually they're a little further rounded off than that, but something to be aware of. It's not just for cut quality. You want to make sure it's aggressive enough to pull everything through and chop it. Obviously, knives can be flipped. Just make sure whatever you flip, try to keep things balanced. Like I said, if something's worn on one side, don't put a new one on the opposite. Keep them matched up. This kind of showing a blow up of the chopping system on a flagship. So 2 chopper belts driving. Some people wonder on the older combines, you moved a belt from one pulley to the other. Why is the flagship got 2 drive belts? So you got that stupid shift collar that everyone would agree with me sucks when you're trying to shift from low to high. But that big pulley is always running that internal shaft that goes to the right side of the combine to run your clean grain, your tailings, your shaker system. So that shaft always has to run the same RPM. That's why you have 2 separate belts, because one has to always run. When you're running high, you're using the inside belt. If you're running low, the inside ones just run along for the ride. I've actually got a couple guys that only do corn, don't do any soybeans. We've just taken that belt off because no sense in it sitting there wearing out when you don't need it. Spreader options on the flagship. The traditional style we always dealt with was our vertical spreaders. We had some troubles trying to get a nice spread pattern on them, breaking out, and so on. So a lot of later machines, we have the horizontal spreaders on, which is back to the old style, like what a 23D8 had. And those do a lot nicer spread. Now, they do not have the gears and the bearings like everyone cussed on the 23D8s and 7088s. those gears would wear out, the spinners stop turning, stuff like that. These are hydraulic drive. They've been a lot more reliable. They give a really nice spread job. Now this vertical one, if you adjust it properly, it can help. That center eagle wing deflector has two sets of holes where you can move it up closer to the spreader. You move it closer, it really helps with the spread. Make sure you move it back away when you go to corn, because there's not clearance for those cobs to come through, and it'll crack out that deflector because those spinners turning, that cob gets caught, something's got to give it. The vibrations will crack it out. So you can do a nice spread job with that older style. Just if you're adjusting that, make sure you move it back. Flagship machines, all machines tend to feed residue more to the right side. The reason is, as that material is coming off the back of the rotor, just by the rotation, it's heavier to the right side. You'll see it on the chopper knives. The right hand side, right hand of center wears faster than the rest. When you spread, now you're putting more residue on the right hand side, so it's tougher to get a good spread. So most of the later flagships have that cane handle looking thing on the elevator side that you can push in, and that's a deflector between the rotor and chopper to help move that material to the center, so that way you can get an even spread. Now remember to remove it back out of there around corn, because the cobs are hard on it. And if you're going to till everything, it probably doesn't matter, but if you're trying to no-till into soybean stubble, having that spread evenly is going to be a big benefit. Mid-range combines, you got your belt drive for your spreaders. Same as the others, you know, if you're running the spinners in high on corn, those cobs are going to cause damage. So run on low. There is a deflector up underneath there. If you duck underneath, you're going to hit your head on it all the time. A lot of the combines, you can move that to help divert the crop flow for the spreaders to one side. It's not as easy as moving that handle with the pins, but there is an option there. Flagship 2-speed electric shift. So on the 250 and 260 series, their older flagships had a 4-speed transmission. When you go to the 250 and 260, they went to a 2-speed transmission. And I've had calls on this, and that 2-speed transmission, there's a high and low switch. You guys will call, and it's like, my low speed is faster than my high speed. You can go in and configure that in Toolbox in the drive. And the nice thing about that, what I tell guys is that low side, you just got your rocker button here to go on the low side. I tell them, if you're going to pick at 5 miles an hour, and that's the fastest you're going to harvest going through the field, you set the low side at 5 miles an hour. That way when you turn around, you can just throw the stick all the way ahead. It's going to go to 5 miles an hour, and that's it. You don't have to sit there and fine tune it all the time to try to get that 5 miles an hour. Then when you get to the end of the land, you want to jump over to the next one, you just hit your button to the high side, and you can have that at 7, 10 miles an hour, whatever, and you'll speed up there. So that's probably the handiest feature I've seen of that, is setting that speed, so that way you're not sitting there fine tuning. Set your max speed and go. And plus, now from 0 to 5 miles an hour, you have this whole range of travel, so you can fine tune a lot more. Whereas if you're 0 to 12 miles an hour here, it's going to be a lot jumpier. The FD2 draper on the later flagships, with an FD2 series draper, you can, instead of having your draper speed control, a separate control in there, you can do it through the monitor. It takes a later software in the 250 series. It's only on the 250 and 260 series combines. It takes later software to do it. If you have an early FD2 that didn't come factory ordered to go that way, there is an update kit, but it's pretty expensive. But that is an option if you have an FD2 to where you're on a 250 or 260 series, you can run those controls through the monitor instead of on a separate switch. Cab air filters. My guys would be pretty safe in saying that when most people are not maintaining their cab air filters. Any of these later flagships, behind this panel here is your air filter cavity, and there's a clean out door on the bottom. The early ones had wing nuts to loosen, drop, kind of a pain. Later one has a latch there where you can adjust it, dump it from the top. Make sure you're dumping that daily. That gets the heavy crap out so it doesn't get it plugged up in your filter. But when we get them in, a lot of times inspection, not saying everyone, but there's a lot of them we get in here, and they have a lot of materials packed clear full, and stuff is growing. It's been there a while. So your air filter is going to be breathing in that stuff, so then you're breathing in that stuff. So make sure you're cleaning that, emptying it out. Engine air, kind of along the same lines, only it's going to slow you down. You know, cab air filter, we don't probably notice the problems with it so much, but your engine air filter plugs, you're going to see it a lot more. The aspirator housing that's on all these later flagship combines is angled like this. The earlier ones, they had a lot of trouble with little venturis on the inside plugging. This style really doesn't ever plug, but what does plug is this tube here. And the pictures don't do it justice, but on most of these machines, it goes from your air filter down under the engine deck, across, back up, and over to your exhaust. So you got plenty of drop spots, heavy wet stuff sets in there. If you picked in dry conditions every day, all day, probably would never cause trouble. But you run in wet conditions one time or a little dew on stuff, you're breathing in that damp air, it'll start building up, and it's going to build up in the low spots. Now you plugged off your air, so your aspirator can't work. You know, your aspirator is, I should back up a little bit, your aspirator housing, the air comes in, it's got fins to spin the air. Spins air so that the heavy particles go to the outside. This is pulling a suction from your exhaust to help pull those heavy particles and blow them out the exhaust, get them out of there, so you don't plug up your filter so bad. If you can't get a full day out of an air filter, that's your problem. Your aspirator's not working. You can buy air filters all you want, but you need to clean that out so you can get a little more life out of them. But the problem is when this tube plugs, now you have no more suction. And what a lot of people do, grab a blowgun, blow it through there. It's like, all right, we're good to go. Well, the problem is you opened up a hole the size of my pinky there. All it takes is one little corn leaf to plug that back off. The best way to do it is take the hose clamps apart and run a wire and a rag or something through there. I should have got it out here. I just went to, I think it was Menards, and I bought a dryer vent cleaning deal. It's too large, but we just trim the fins back down to where they fit. It's got extensions. You can put on a drill, and you can rotor-rooter it right through those pipes, and you'll get a lot of material out of there. It makes a hell of a difference. Clean that out. Get it cleaned out good. This little backflow check valve, you will have to undo that out of there to get through, obviously. But make sure that gets put back in. Make sure there's a directional arrow, and it should say top on it. Make sure all that's situated right. That's a little flapper valve that if this gets too plugged or your air screen gets too plugged out here, that engine is pulling air. It'll pull exhaust back through and burn your air filter and melt your housing. So make sure this flapper valve is working condition and in there properly. Otherwise, you'll melt your air filter housing, burn your air filter. That's why it happens. It's why that flapper valve is there, is to prevent that from happening. So this is the trimmed down version, but I think must have been 4 or 5 inches diameter, but they got different extensions you add on. You just put on a drill and you run it through there, and you're going to clean all that out really good. So pretty cheap investment. And prior to that, we would take a little ratchet strap and use blowgun to blow it through there and tie a rag on and pull through, but that gets that caked on stuff out of there. If you guys are running a chopping head, if you've never ran a chopping head, you probably don't know what sucrose is. But if you're in a chopping head, it's a sticky, it's wax. It looks like when you run down the road in the winter and your vehicle's got all that stuff, road salt on it. It's similar to that, only worse. But your air screen is usually the first thing that suffers. It'll get plugged. They do make an option of just a bristle brush that attaches to that wand that turns to help scrape it. But there is this rolling brush kit that, as you can see, it's a lot more aggressive, but it makes quite a difference. Like I said, if you don't run a chopping head, probably nothing you need to worry about. But if you run a chopping head, you know what I'm talking about, that sucrose. Your grain cart tractor is going to fight it too. It's just your grain cart tractor is not running at 100% engine load all day long. You're not going to notice that so much. But that's an example there when I was talking on your air filter plugging and it pulling exhaust through. Well, if this screen, all your engine air is coming through here too. Your engine fan is stronger than your turbo. So your engine fan is going to rob all that air, and now your turbo has nothing left. It's going to be trying to pull. That's where it's going to try to pull backwards through the aspirator. That's why that flapper valve is important. We don't have much trouble, but I just want you guys to make sure you're getting that flapper valve back in there correctly if you have it apart. Most importantly is get out and check your losses. We don't have many of these squares. We had a bunch last year, hand a lot out. We didn't order any back or didn't get any back, but I got a few here if someone wants them. Ideas here is you can set this on the ground, and that's where you're counting your kernels. So how many kernels are inside a square foot? And it's got charts on it to help you do the math. But too many times I've had people call me in the spring when they're planting, or in the summer when they get the volunteer corn, like, man, we had a mess. Where'd it come from? I don't know. Was it shell in the field before you even got there? Was it header shell? Was it rotor loss, sieve loss? Who knows? You know, it could have been a hailstorm the night before that knocked some of that out, but we don't know. You need to be checking those losses in the field. If you're leaving 10 bushel the acre out there, there's nothing you can do after the fact. But if you make a pass through the field and you stop and you're leaving 10 bushel, you can correct it right then. So make sure you guys are checking. Usually you get it set on a certain number of variety, whatever. And any of you guys that ran combine long enough, you can kind of tell, feel it. But you know, you switch numbers, varieties, go from 12% corn back to 17% corn or something like that. Get out and just check. Just kick the trash and make sure. Everyone says $3 corn, it isn't worth it. Nah, you need every bushel that much worse. When it's worth something, everyone's worried about the bushels then too, but we need to worry about them when it's $3 corn too. So check your losses. We can't fix anything after the fact. And that's it for now. We're going to split into our other sessions.